Well, greetings and welcome to the Draft Professor weekly mock draft where we have 32 fans drafting for 32 teams. The mock draft starts in about 5 minutes. So this is me making sure the YouTube feed is working, making sure the Twitter feed is working, and getting all of the broadcast aspects of the show started. I will be joined on the podcast today by Randy and Will. So you'll know Randy as Snap Judgments on X. You will know Will as Accidental Zen on X. And Hunter, great to see you. So Hunter, all you're going to have to do is when you're on the clock, type your pick into the chat the same way that you type this in. So I will have the simulator up here in a few minutes. And we got Randy coming on. Randy, how are you doing?
Oh, are we live already?
We are live already. I get the feed going about 5 minutes early, just to make sure that all the socials and stuff like that are getting aligned. You want to let everybody know about the content you make right now?
Yeah, sure. I got a channel on YouTube here called Snap Judgments, and I do a daily stream about 9 a.m. usually, about an hour usually, give or take. I do a lot of Patriots leaning, if not focused entirely stuff, a lot of draft stuff. That's pretty much that. You can go follow me there or on Twitter, X, whatever we're calling it these days. RI Sports News right there, mostly because I don't know how to change the handle. So I'm technologically challenged in these ways.
So, Hunter, can you remind me what team you are drafting for?
2 seconds.
Is that a Houston Texans logo, I think, on that hat? Confirm. And then, Jordan, you were on the podcast with me last night. It's great to see you here drafting. So, Jordan, if you want to pick up a second team, you would be able to draft for the Panthers, and I'm looking for an AFC team that picks close to the Panthers. Like, if you wanted to draft for the Chargers, you could do that as well. And that'll keep you engaged in the podcast a little bit more than just drafting for one team. Okay, so Hunter, great to see you. Will, good to see you. How are you?
They opened the door of the crypt and I slid out. I crawled out. I have literally not been outside this week since the Super Bowl started.
Well, and when there's snow on the ground, nobody can blame you. So, Will, at the beginning of the podcast, you want to let everybody know about Steeler Fury and your social media, and then we will get the mock draft started here in a few minutes.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm Will Massasak. If you're on Twitter, you know me as that annoying guy, Accidental Zen, who's always pontificating about something related to sports, and not just for clicks. Have started a podcast in 2008 called Steeler Fury, the Pittsburgh Steelers Show, which is the longest running Steelers related podcast in the world. Most of you didn't even know podcasting could happen in 2008, but we did. We're small but mighty. Been going on for a long time, and in the off season, in particular, we do a lot of draft coverage, including a week's worth of draft shows that are generally like an hour and a half to sometimes 3 or 4 hours long each night of the week. And we participated last year in the epic mock that you put on, Jim, and are doing it again this year with the Steelers War Room, and then did like a Hard Knocks version of everything that happened to us that week that we published just after.
Well, your Hard Knocks was definitely a thing to see. So welcome, Will and Randy. Will and Randy will be discussing all of the picks that are coming in and just making sure that we're about ready to go. So we are at 7:00. So the timer starts. So hopefully a few more people join the chat. So I've got the simulator up. We're going to be doing 3 rounds tonight. So Will, first pick is in, And I haven't had the chance to talk with you about Fernando Mendoza. Where is he on your quarterback spectrum?
It's shocking that he's the first pick. I mean, in this class, he's definitely the first pick. And if you're a quarterback starved team like the Raiders are, why not? I love the clutch gene. I love sort of his attitude. I don't know if I love his accuracy, like that sort of secondary level accuracy. There's some, questions about how well he processes, but these are things you can work with him on and improve. And I think it's a great choice.
Yeah, what interests me there in Vegas with Mendoza is kind of the personality fit, because I just feel like, between quarterback and coach, you've got to have an alpha dog. And I don't know that either one of those guys is. From what I was hearing the other day, Kubiak introducing himself as kind of a quiet, soft-spoken guy. And Mendoza is just kind of a quirky kid. He's a good kid, I'm sure, and whatever, but he's a little quirky. I heard somebody describe him as football on the spectrum, and it absolutely cracked me up.
That's pretty good.
Because he's just, like I said, he's a little quirky. I don't know how the personality stuff's going to work out in terms of leadership there, because you can have all the talent in the world, you can have all the offensive ingenuity in the world, but as Miami, Mike McDaniels and Tua just proved to us over the past few years, it can get a little slippery when the other stuff comes into play.
But to your Tua and McDaniel example, I'll throw out there Kyle Shanahan and Brock Purdy, which I think is a similar kind of, they're both sort of more nerdy types in the way that Mendoza and Kubiak are. So in a way, it works for them, but maybe you're right, it doesn't work for everybody. Especially changing the culture for new quarterback, new coach is much harder than stepping into a good organization.
Okay, so second pick is in. Randy, any thoughts on Mekhi Lemon going at 2?
Yeah, I mean, this is high for Mekhi Lemon, certainly. I know a lot of people have him wide receiver 1. I think he's more like wide receiver 3 myself. Look, he fits in well with Garrett Wilson there in New York. I'm not sure who's going to be throwing them the ball, but they're going to have to answer that at some point later on in this draft, perhaps, or in the free agency cycle. It'll be interesting to see how things work out there, but they certainly need more weapons. They really need more talent pretty much everywhere on that team. So it's almost like you can't make a bad pick here.
Yeah, that's hot for me. I like Mekhi Lemon, and I like him in a vacuum. By that, when I say that, you'll hear me say that other times. What I mean is I'm not sure how well it fits exactly what they need or what they are doing there, but he's a dog, and he will make a lot of plays for somebody, and probably overproduce where he's actually selected in the draft. But I think 2 is maybe a little bit hot. It's coming in hot.
Yeah, I agree 100%.
That was an admin pick. I had to do something to shake the mock up because we've been doing pretty much the same picks to the Jets every week. So
I know you well enough, Jim. I almost said that. It's good to give them something new. And to Randy's point, they need everything. So.
Yep. Okay, so JT, you're there. We go. Okay, I was waiting for his pick to come in.
Maui Noah.
So I'll go. I guess I'll go first on this. I love the player. I just think he's probably someone that the floor is high level guard play for the the rest of his 10-year plus career in the NFL, and you're probably getting at least a right tackle that's a substantial starter. This is the kind of pick I think if you're picking early in the draft and you need everything, pick the trenches would be my advice.
Okay, so we need to make an admin pick here for the Giants, so I will go Carnell Tate.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, for me, Carnell Tate comes in as wide receiver 1, and that's just look. Jordan Tyson has all kinds of talent, all the talent in the world, and I'm not a doctor. I don't even play one on TV, but I can tell you that I don't know all the intricacies of like Jordan Tyson's injuries and the frequency of them and the risk of it re-injury and all that. What I do know is I don't even have to have that conversation about Carnell Tate. So for that reason, along with the OSU breeding, right, the Ohio State background, look, you practically can't miss on these guys. So for those reasons, Carnell Tate comes in as wide receiver 1 for me. This is a good pick for them.
It's interesting. I have Jordan Tyson 1, but the thing is, I don't have access to his medicals. I have no way to evaluate that. I can only look at the player that played on tape. And I felt like he has better hands than Tate. He runs better routes than Tate. And he's probably better at contested catches than Tate. Tate is really talented and is going to make a ton of plays and probably will be another in a long history of Ohio State receivers that are successful. But I do think he's got, he's not quite as good a player, but maybe he's healthier and that's makes him a safer pick. That I agree with.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I go back to that every time I think about Jordan Tyson. I think about the one catch there against Texas State where Sam Levitt jumped through the ball and then Tyson jumps and grabs it and then not only lands with the catch, but turns, vaults over another player and then dives into the end. It was one of the most impressive catches I've ever seen in my life. He's an athletic specimen, absolutely an electric player to watch. It's just that health stuff. I mean, he's missed something like 45% of the games that he's played, 40% of the games that he could have played in college. And I mean, that has got to scare you.
Yeah. Well, that's what Frank Gore's situation was before he got to the NFL. So, sometimes they last forever. You never know.
Yeah, I mean, I also got to wonder a little bit with Jordan Tyson about leaving Colorado and what was going on there that made him leave Colorado. Did he not want to be co-top dog with Travis Hunter? Was there some personality stuff? I just if I were a GM, I would want to sit in a room and ask those questions and get those answers.
As to Sonny Styles, I personally think Sonny Styles is the best player in this draft class. I think how you evaluate the value of the linebacker position, I evaluate a little differently than most. I separate them into categories. The all-around players are really, super valuable, like a G.I. Campbell or Fred Warner. The guys like Styles, I think, is maybe not quite to that level of all-around, but I think he's a guy that you can build your entire defense around. And to me, it doesn't matter that you want to call it a linebacker; it's a playmaker. And I think he's like a sort of a Ryan Shazier type player. And if you have that kind of a career, you deserve to go top 5.
Yeah. I mean, you can almost use him in the same way that you see not quite, but like a Nicky Manwari in terms of the versatility and having him on the field and be able to cover, but also be able to help shut down the run. The former converted safety, he's got all the tools to succeed in this league. And I agree. I think he's definitely a top 5 pick. This is a great pick.
Yeah, that's also with the match with Schwessinger. You're absolutely right. That came from the comments. That's a terrific match.
Okay, and then Arvell Reese at 7 to the Commanders.
Yeah, I mean, Arvell Reese, the whole question about him is about his usage, whether or not he's going to be an edge, if he's going to be an off-ball linebacker. I think with Dan Quinn there in Washington, he's going to be able to find ways to use him to get after the opposing quarterback, and that's going to make him an incredibly valuable pick for them there at 7. He, a lot of people consider him to be the best player in this draft. Certainly one of the top 3 to 5 best players in this draft. So just the fact that you're getting him at 7 is pretty great value.
Listen, in the age of substitution, the age of substitution and specialization in the NFL, positionless football is the answer to that stuff. And I think this is a perfect kind of a player. And I think Micah Parsons was a similar situation where when he's on the field, you're not really sure what he's going to be. And he could, you can leave him on the field against a lot of different packages. So I do like that concept with Reese. I'm not sure if he's good enough to just be an edge rusher or good enough to just be a linebacker. So that's my only sort of question mark, but I do think he's a tremendous talent.
Yeah. And the one bit of caution with him is really, it's just the 1 year of production, right? It's the 1 year that he all of a sudden came on the scene. Nobody knew about him at this time last year. So, you've always got to be a little bit, cautious with players like that are just popping for 1 year. Maybe it's a specific scheme fit or system fit that helped them do that. There's got to be a little bit of questions there sometimes. All right, what do we got up next?
Well, we got our Jordan Tyson
Bailey pick. Lee Hunter.
Yeah.
Wait, what? Lee Hunter went?
Yeah. Well,
I'm making sure that this mock is different than the ones that we've done before.
Well,
Yeah, you
and
are.
I think at the end of the senior, like the last day of practice at the Senior Bowl, at that point in time, if you just froze everybody's draft board, he might have been bumped up a little bit there. I'm not sure that will last through the combine, but not impossible. I mean, I don't know that he's my favorite. I wouldn't put him in the very top of the defensive line class, but I do think it's a kind of a skinny defensive line class. So picking one early that you like that fits what you want to do, I don't really have too much of a problem with that. But whether it's that guy or not.
Yeah, I mean, if you hear some commotion in the background, that's Peter Woods throwing a chair through the TV in the green room. He would have dropped, for him to have dropped below Lee Hunter it would be pretty wild. Look, he made a lot of noise at the Senior Bowl. At the end of the day, it's still just the Senior Bowl. You've got a year of tape. And in the case of Peter Woods, you've got 2 years of tape. I think Peter Woods is the clear DT1 in this class. I think Caleb Banks had a chance to get there at one point in time, but injuries derailing his season. He's the only guy that I would have had challenging Peter Woods for defensive tackle one.
What?
I think I understand why Cincinnati would want to steer clear from a Clemson defensive line player because, look, I'm a little bit spooked by Clemson defensive line players. I just think they so often don't come out as all you want them to.
Yeah.
And so, I can understand that, but I just think Lee Hunter is definitely behind Peter Woods for me in this class.
Yeah, I'm Caleb Downs first. I feel like a very similar situation to the guy that I last year kept pounding the table for somebody to tell me that why Deion Walker wasn't a first round pick, should have been. And this is a very similar situation. 2 years ago, it was like killing the SEC, and it just so happened that he had a down year, but I don't think that was really indicative of a drop off in his ability. And then the guy we didn't talk about was David Bailey. I think is a really nice fit for Kansas City. The red flags part of it also fits Kansas City perfectly. Whoever did that.
Right, him and Rashee Rice, like, watch out, people. Okay, watch out, people of Kansas City. Look, I think that David Bailey, to me, is a guy who's going to suffer a little bit because of the actions of James Pierce Jr. this past weekend, because of the actions of Abdul Carter throughout the year. Guys like this that, red flags we knew about beforehand, and they come back to end up biting you in the ass a little bit. And, we saw Abdul Carter, not quite to the level of James Pierce Jr., obviously, but he was disciplined by the team a couple times this year. He'd sat for a quarter versus the Patriots, and he had already been sat for the first drive of the game prior to that for just kind of screwing off, no work, all the stuff that we kind of heard about out of Penn State before the draft that shouldn't have really taken anybody by surprise. And, the James Pierce stuff this past weekend is a really extreme level of it, but you've got to start taking those character concerns into consideration. Even if you can keep these kids under control for a few years, nobody wants my team, in the police blotter, in the morning paper, or whatever it is you read these days. So I think that GMs are probably going to be a little bit careful about someone like David Bailey in this year's draft, personally.
I think it was easier to be James Harrison 20 years ago than it is now. That's really the thing. David Bailey's anger issues, no different than James Harrison, but it was more acceptable. There was a way to work around it. Then now we're in an age where you can't do anything like that.
Yeah, I mean, even on the football field itself, you've got to be a lot more quiet and not quite withdrawn, but less emotional.
Yep.
Than before. The guy that just went off the board there, Mansour Delane, that really makes a lot of sense to me as a pick for the Cowboys. Look, unless the Cowboys are trying to go full Cincinnati Bengals, they need to have most of their picks here focus on the defensive side of the ball rather. Mansour Delane specifically makes sense to me. I can't remember the name off the top of my head, but their new secondary coach was the guy that recruited Mansour Delane to Virginia and coached him there. So that really makes sense to me as a fit in terms of just fitting into the team and coaching fit and coaches, somebody in that room that wants to stand on the table and bang that table for Mansour over a guy like Jermod McCoy or whoever else you might have as CB1 in the class.
And Caleb Downs went off before. I love the matchup with Minka Fitzpatrick as their safety combo. I think you can do a lot of stuff with those two. They're both have the potential to be big playmakers in the NFL, and putting two of them together is even better in that way. It's adding a strength to a strength, sort of, but for Miami, once again, a team that can use all the help on defense they can get.
Well, yeah, and I mean, my only question there is Miami is basically lining up me and you at cornerback. So, what are their plans there? They're going to need to address that at some point in this draft. Caleb Downs is a great player. A lot of people have him number 1 in the class. But he's not a cornerback, and you're still lining up Storm Duck there, and Jack Jones, and those aren't guys, like, for one reason or another, that you want to depend on. Jack Jones is a guy that people can't get out of their locker room fast enough, generally speaking, in this league. So, you don't want him to be your CB1. You've got to go out there and you've got to acquire some talent at the cornerback position in this draft. Really everywhere on this team needs help. I think that their offensive line really needs some attention too. They were starting Cole Strange at right guard at the end of this season, and nobody wants to do that. So, you can really grab a lot of different players in this draft and do some good in Miami.
Nice. Spencer Fano to the Rams. I'm going to give the thumbs up to any offensive line, a defensive line pick of value that anybody makes in this draft, because I feel like that's a thing that, especially in mocks, tends to be underutilized. And in real life, it makes a huge difference. We're seeing the era right now of, well, if you can't get the elite quarterback, then the next best thing is to just load up on offensive and defensive linemen. That's been the sort of Philly brand that worked for Seattle. So I think we're going to see a lot of that, and probably teams that you already think have a pretty good offensive and defensive line are still going to add more guys. And he can play. And Spencer Fano, I think, is a very nice left tackle prospect in the NFL, especially for a team like LA that throws it a lot.
Yeah, I mean, and he's a versatile guy. They've got some questions in LA. Havenstein just retired. They've got a fairly solid interior, if I remember correctly. LA is not exactly my team. I'm not a specialist on the roster, but I feel like they've got a fairly solid interior out there. But still, he can move around the line if there are injuries, if there are any other issues. He's the sort of guy that helps you get your best 5 on the field. And really, at the end of the day, that's what building an offensive line in the NFL is about. Not necessarily about position specialization, especially outside of that left tackle spot.
I was going to sound all smart by saying, play the best 5 no matter who, and then you said it anyway.
Great minds. Great minds.
Before Peter Woods, what was the
Jordan Tyson is one that we didn't hit on, and that was New Orleans at 6.
Yeah.
New Orleans definitely needs some reliable weapons. Chris Olave, while he's wildly talented, just availability is the greatest ability, and he just hasn't always been available. Concussion issues or something that they don't play around with these days, and they can really take you off the field. They can end your career outright. So I think getting some weapons, if you're, a Tyler Shuck believer and you want to make that quarterback work, you've got to get him somebody to throw to. So Jordan Tyson's a great pick there, especially with the fact that Carnell Tate and Mekhi Lemon are already off the board. Like, you've got one guy left and the blue chip level of the wide receiver position. So go out and get yourself a pass catcher.
Just laughing because between Olave and Tyson, they'll have one player that, available all the time.
Yeah, no, they're going to be great friends hanging out in the training room all the time. Maybe Michael Thomas can come down and show them the way. You would think that New Orleans would be sick and tired of taking these wide receivers that are made out of porcelain, but here they are.
Nice. And I saw Denzel Boston, or what's his name? Boston.
Denzel Boston went off the clock to the Ravens there. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's actually a very solid pick for them. I think one thing I like about him is I think he's a guy that can make your quarterback seem more accurate than he actually is. Very good ball tracker and go and get it kind of a guy. So that's a nice fit. I'm not saying Lamar Jackson is incredibly inaccurate or anything. I think at times he's tremendous that way, but it definitely helps when you're scrambling a little bit and you're on the move and that's how you're geared to play. It's nice to have a guy that can sort of go get it for you. I think that's
yeah. I mean, you got a big receiver like that with the catch radius he has and the contested catch skills that he's got. And Denzel Boston, like, he's got a lot more shimmy and shake than you would think a 6'4" guy at about 220 really does, right? I mean, he was out there returning punts for distance and touchdowns. So that's an underrated receiver, in my opinion, in this class. for my Patriots, he's the top guy on our board at the receiver class because that's just a guy I would love to pair with a young Drake May. So seeing him go off at 14 just hurts me a little bit deep inside right here.
Okay, so Will, we get to you.
Yeah, well, Caleb Banks just went. So I'm sure that that is a player that would be on Pittsburgh's board. So that's a little disappointing. And the receivers are all gone, including Boston, before they pick. So yeah, this is going to be interesting to see who Pittsburgh. I'm not picking, right?
Well, you're a Steelers fan. I just will put you on the clock. We didn't have
got
anybody.
Steeler Fury all there. Listen.
Well, I'm interested to see who somebody else would pick. If it were last year and Mike Tomlin was still there, they would pick Casey Concepcion, the receiver from Texas A&M. But I don't think that's a particularly good fit with Mike McCarthy. I am tempted to do something really, really dull, and pick Ione, the guard from Penn State. Actually, no, sorry, don't do that. Don't send that pick up. Caden McDonald. Right. Caden McDonald from Ohio State would be the pick. They're sort of like, they could now end up with 3 young guys on a defensive line and be able to rotate a little bit more than they were able to in previous years. Cam Hayward is still playing well, but we don't know how long that's going to continue. So I like the idea of adding a better run defender to the middle of that pile, and someone who I think can still rotate and, just do more than that. But that's a good starting point for what they need, and I think they need some help there.
Yeah, I mean, going back-to-back years with the defensive tackle position is, a little bit overloading there, right? But that defense was so heavily reliant on Derek Harmon against the run. I don't remember the specific numbers right now. I don't have them at my fingertips.
It was bad. Some of it was, some of it was who they played.
Wild. Yeah, I mean, the on-off splits where Derek Harmon was, when he was off the field, they were giving up like twice as many rushing yards as when he was on the field. And, I'm sure there's probably context to that, but still, he was an impactful player, and you don't want to have to rely that heavily on one rookie.
Yep, absolutely. What do you guys think about the only one that we missed that I wanted to mention was Jeremiah Love to the Vikings. To me, I'm like, first round running back. If you're a team that thinks you have everything and you're ready to buy the rims for your Maserati, that's when you pick a first round running back. And I'm not sure that's true with the Vikings, but I'm not sure what else, they should do there. I think they have a safety and secondary issue.
Yeah, I mean, there are probably a couple ways that they could go with that pick, but really, you've got a young quarterback that's struggling, that's had issues. Sometimes the best way to help that guy is to give yourself a really good running back that takes the pressure off the quarterback. You don't have to throw it quite as much. Adam Jones, the running back there, he's really struggled with injuries throughout the course of his career, not just last year. So, you cannot sit there and rely upon him being available 17 games every year. Going after a young asset like Jeremiah Love does make a lot of sense to kind of light a fire under that offense and, give yourself some different options that aren't a young quarterback that really, he's never thrown the ball a lot in his career, right? At Michigan, he didn't throw the ball a lot. And then in Minnesota so far, I mean, he sat 1 year with the injury and he really struggled this past year. I think giving your offense a little punch in the arm like that makes a lot of sense.
Well, it'll really help the next quarterback that comes in there.
Yeah. We got this pick that just went off the board here, Kenyon Sadiq to the Philadelphia Eagles. And that gets my attention because I just think Philadelphia has some real questions on the offensive line. It surprises me that they wouldn't address that. Between their offensive line coach leaving the job. I don't know if he's retiring. I just know he's done with the Eagles. But I think there are also questions about whether or not Landon Dickerson retires or comes back, whether or not Lane Johnson retires or comes back, and whether or not they retire or come back this offseason. You don't want 2 members of your starting offensive line retiring in the same year. Even if it's next year, you want to typically, especially with the Eagles, they want to think ahead. They want to get their replacements in the door a year or 2 ahead. I don't think that they have the replacement for right tackle on the roster right now, even with the developmental guys that they took in the draft last year. So, it would just surprise me if they didn't address the offensive line. The Eagles know how to build a team, and they know that starts from the trenches on both sides of the ball. I would be real surprised if they went tight end in the first round.
Can't argue with that. And the next two picks are both offensive line or linemen. So it's one of those things, man. It's if you want to keep your team healthy, I mean, you pick offensive line whenever it doesn't feel, when you don't know what else to do and you don't have the guy you really coveted, go to the trenches, right? I mean, I think that's a pretty solid strategy even for NFL teams.
So, Will, I'm on the clock here for Buffalo. Where do you have Surratt versus Concepcion on your wide receiver board?
Be right back in 1 second.
Yeah, I think it's going to depend on how position specific your offense is, because some offenses in the NFL, they want guys who can do all three roles very well. And some offenses, they're looking for more specialized guys. Surratt, I think, maybe has a little bit more. They're both in a similar situation. They're both sort of types. So Surratt, I think, is more of a possession guy, make those catches along the sideline, back shoulder throws, etc. Concepcion is like turns everything into a punt return. It's a slot guy with a lot of juice. I would say if you have a short passing game and you want to catch and run guy, Concepcion, it would be higher. And so I think that's where I have him higher. We were missing a wide receiver that I would have higher than both of them, at least one. But I would say I like them both, and I think they can both be productive in the right fit.
So who do you have is there a receiver that you have on your board that's higher than Concepcion and Surratt?
I think Ted Hurst is a better NFL prospect than either of those guys. But you're once again, you got to be a franchise that's okay with taking a swing to try to hit a home run rather than hit singles and doubles. So,
well, and I wonder, is there a little bit of crossover in terms of skill set between Concepcion and Khalil Shakir at all?
Well, I mean, there is a draft professor that said the comp for Concepcion is Khalil Shakir on crack.
Right, and so that's kind of what makes sense. I think if you're trying to build a wide receiver room, you want to build it out of different skill sets, in my opinion, anyway. I don't want three guys that do the same thing. I want three guys that do different things really well.
Okay, well, I'm going off the rails. I'm doing Ted Hurst to Buffalo round one. Will, I will stick with your
I just think it's, in a way, it's so many ways, a huge run on wide receivers in the first round compared to what we're likely to see. But to me, Ted Hurst is George Pickens. That runs a 4.3. But we never really know what George Pickens was going to run because he was injured during the process. But I don't think he's a 4.3 guy. So you've added this sort of element of speed to almost all the other stuff that George Pickens does. So I love that concept. It's going to be, he's just a product from the sense of his level of competition. So I think it's a bit of a risk, and probably in real life, I wouldn't take him in round one. I would just move down and think that he's going to be around a little bit later. But yeah, we're trying to mix it up a little bit. I don't think you're going to be dissatisfied with that. I just feel like it's let's see what he runs at the combine. But I think if he runs 4.3, he might legitimately get bumped up into a late 1, early 2 kind of a pick. But we'll see. I think right now he's late 2, early 3.
Okay, and again, I can be talked into a lot of things. So, have you guys done
Very
Kristen Miller or Monroe Freeling?
So, I mean, Monroe Freeling is a super athletic tackle. He's young. He's kind of still learning his craft. This time last year, end of the year tape, he was no bueno. Okay, not very good at this at all. But by the last month of this season, he had really improved his game. He was getting out there, even in run blocking, getting up in the second level, making an impact in the game. I think he's an ideal guy to sit behind a Trent Williams. I am curious. I feel like San Fran might be better served to get someone who's got a little bit of positional versatility. So it's like they could play at guard, they could play at tackle. I'm not sure Monroe Freeling is that guy. But draft him, give him a shot, see how it works out in training camp. But at very worst case, you've got somebody to sit behind Trent Williams for a year or two, come out and really do a great job.
So Freeland.
Yeah, I think he just misspelled Freeling. He goes to right tackle.
Freeling's off the board, Hunter. Okay.
Yeah. And then as for Kristen Miller, I mean, the Chicago Bears have been plugging away at the interior of that defensive line for a couple of years now. They weren't using kind of their top asset for a while. It was like third rounders, who was Jervon Dexter out of Florida. There are a couple other guys in that sort of like 75-ish range that they'd grab and throw in their third and fourth rounders. I think going after a premium talent or, top talent at the defensive tackle position in Kristen Miller makes a lot of sense. Kind of finally answer those questions and hopefully stop having to throw darts at that position for a couple of years at least.
I have to laugh, Jim. Since you asked me the question about who I would have ahead of him, that happened to be the first guy I thought of. But I just looked at my board, and I've got 3 other guys ahead of those 2. So there are more to come, I guess. Deep wide receiver class, shocking.
Yeah, very deep wide receiver class, really good one too. I mean, really, whatever flavor you want. You want a big, tall X receiver. You want a possession receiver. You want a red zone threat. You want a little quick guy to play on the slot. You want a guy to help on punt returns. You want a guy to help on kick returns. You want a guy to come over to your house and do your hair. Look, he's probably on this draft pool. Okay. They got a little bit of everything, whatever you need. We got it here, some level too. I mean, I'm talking first round, second round, third round. Throughout there are options at every one of those skill sets that are reasonable options that could perform in this league. This wide receiver class is going to really impact this league in a big way.
Well, considering I would say there's several positions in this draft class that are not very deep or not necessarily that great. So in comparison, maybe we will see a lot of wide receivers taken early because there are more guys that seem like they can make an impact on your team as opposed to role players.
Yeah, and I mean, this was a different draft too so far where 3 wide receivers went out in the first 6 picks. That really kind of put pressure to all of a sudden, well, those top guys are going, and then Denzel Boston was gone by pick 14 as well. And, all of a sudden they're really starting to fly off the board. We see Mac Nachor, and that's the only time I'm going to attempt to say that name, go off the board here to the Texans. And I mean, honestly, look, the Texans are pretty much playing like, lucky fan wins and comes in and plays offensive line for us. Okay. They got rid of all their offensive line players last year. They decided to replace them with only wide receivers and Ariantre Ursary, who struggled. He's a young tackle. He was one of their better players on the offensive line, but that doesn't mean he was great. Okay. That's like being the youngest lady at the nursing home. It's just not great. Okay. They could basically add talent anywhere along that offensive line. Max Ihinachor is a good talent. He's really new to this game. Basketball body. I worry a little bit about his lower half, and I wonder if there are going to be some issues. There are bigger guys that, bigger guys tend to have problems with their feet, with their ankles, with the lower half, just because it's carrying around so much weight, especially if it's like kind of manufactured weight. He's got that basketball player frame, and I just don't know if it's built to carry all that weight. So we're going to find out for sure. And, if it is, he's incredibly athletic and he's going to be a good player in this league.
Okay, so we are all caught up. We've covered every pick.
Well, it's Emmanuel Pregnon. He went to Cleveland, and they took, what did they take? Carnell Tate with their first pick, right?
Which team was that?
Cleveland. Sonny Styles was their first pick. Okay. All right. Yeah. I mean, Emmanuel Pregnon makes a lot of sense. It's not very often that your team has their entire offensive line entering free agency. I mean, literally every position there.
No, DeJuan Jones, I think, is the only one not.
Oh, right. But he did not start there. He was injured this year, right?
Well, but I'm saying he would have been. He was a starter on paper. But otherwise, everybody who was at the end of the year starting is gone.
But I mean, point being is you could pretty much select any offensive lineman in this draft, and they would fit in well on the Cleveland roster. I would not be surprised to see them double dip on offensive line in the first round. Look, I think that their coach Todd Monken, he was the type of guy who people were surprised was interviewing for head coach positions. I think he's kind of the type of guy who's going to take the job no matter what. restrictions, no matter what so if the owner sat down and said, listen, we want Shador to start here, we want somebody who's going to make it work, somebody who's on his last chance and doesn't really have any offers anywhere else is going to go, screw it, I'll try. Why not? Right. And so the best way you can do that is to keep him upright, give him good offensive line players. Emmanuel Pregnon is exactly that. He's my offensive guard number 2 in this class behind Vega Ioane. He, had a great year of production at Oregon, played at, was it USC or UCLA before that? But, lesser known name coming into the year, did really well at Oregon, got his name up into the back half of the first round consideration like this. And, I've just, that's a really good pick for Cleveland to build your offensive line around.
USC and Wyoming, by the way.
Okay.
Yep. So, Randy, do you want to do your Patriots pick, and then we have to circle back to Keldrick Falk?
Yeah. Sounds like a plan. Look, the Patriots have a number of needs here. I think X wide receiver is a need that's really highlighted and, largely dependent on whether or not Steph Diggs returns to this team. He took up a lot of targets and, he has, he's been an important player and leader to this team and, eclipsed 1,000 yards and all of that. But man, he comes with a lot of baggage. And, he's a hard guy for a lot of these fans to cheer for, to be honest. I've heard that repeatedly out of Patriots fans. So if they don't bring him back, that wouldn't surprise me. You're going to have somebody to take up some more targets in that wide receiver room. So, for the sake of, following Jim's example and changing things up a little bit in the first round here, the Patriots are going to go ahead and take Chris Brazzell. He's not, the one thing that keeps him behind a guy like Malachi Fields or Denzel Boston, in my mind, is that he's not a big run blocker. He's got kind of a rep for a low effort guy, a guy that kind of just kind of hangs out when it's not his turn. And, a guy that I trust a lot and is plugged into a lot of these SEC programs, tells me that their coaching staff kind of asks them to do that. It's like, listen, it's not your route. Don't worry about it. Take it easy, that sort of thing. Conserve your energy for when the time it is. I don't know if that's right or not, but if he is, a guy that his effort matches his speed and physical tools, he could be a real interesting player to have up here to pair with Drake May and have him bombing those long shots downfield.
Okay, so let's circle back. We didn't get Keldrick Falk to the Panthers. Will, thoughts there?
Oh, man, that feels like of all the people that have been picked so far in this round, the one I worry the most about, the bust factor. If it works out, it's a hit, and it's a need, and he's going to be a great player. But I think there's a lot of things to be questioning about what his floor is like. Also, as I'm fond of saying on this show and elsewhere, I don't really like to pigeonhole I'm not ranking edge players until I see their workouts, because I think there's such a high correlation at that position with your athletic prowess. It can't be the only thing, or your Shamar Stewart, but it has to be it has to be at elite level to be really successful in the NFL. So that's a curious. I think he'll probably work out well, but yeah, there's some issues on tape, and I'm just not sure if it's that he's just been led to play with his native or innate talent and isn't necessarily coached that well, or if it's kind of his nuance and understanding of the game and battle plan. Maybe I'm on an island here, but I'm just a worry about that guy as an early pick for my team. What would you say, Randy?
A lot of people look at Keldrick Falk and see a Shamar Stewart-like player, and I look at Keldrick Falk, I think of him more as this year's Michael Williams, where he's got, a little bit of tape. He's a good run stopper, not a lot of pass rush production, but incredibly young. Okay, I think he's 20 years old right now as we're talking right now. I don't think he's old enough to go down to the store and buy a six-pack. So, it's very hard for me to judge what's an incomplete product at best. I think he's got a high floor though. So that's what, I think when you're a good sized guy that's got the ability to set the edge and be effective in the run game, that gives you something of a high floor in this league, and you'll be able to earn the time and earn the reps on the field to get better at pass rush. So, I think he's certainly got the potential. It's just really hard to say what he's going to be at this particular age, right? He's got so much development ahead of him.
Yeah, but here's the thing: Shamar Stewart was only 21 last year too. So I'm not, and it may be that he blossoms in a given time because of his age. I just wonder, like, what are you really drafting at that point in the draft?
Yeah, I mean, the difference to me is that Shamar Stewart was drafted by Cincinnati. And like sometimes you're just gonna listen, there's so much of this that falls upon where you land and how well they do. And Cincinnati seemed bound and determined to set their entire edge position completely on fire last year. Inexplicably, I just couldn't figure it out. Okay. It's dumb stuff that you're bickering over, costing yourself issues. I couldn't understand it. I think that it's just Cincinnati's going to be what Cincinnati's going to be, and that's the way they choose to do business and so forth. But it set Shamar Stewart's development all off course. I wouldn't be surprised to see Shamar Stewart be a slightly better player this year. He'll have a full off season. He won't have all that contractual back and forth, not only eating away at just normal time and whatever that he could be reading the playbook and talking with coaches, but training camp and all of that. Look, we were well into training camp before he signed that contract and got on the practice field.
True.
So I think that looking at his rookie year without looking at the context of everything that preceded him actually getting on the field, is just a very small picture.
And the worst player I know of that was a top 100 pick with that kind of athletic profile at the edge position, the worst one that I can think of off the top of my head that wasn't either injured or got busted for steroids was Bud Dupree. So if Shamar Stewart's career is Bud Dupree, that's not a total swing and a miss. That's you're still getting a solid starter out of it. But yeah, I think if you bet on those traits at that position, it's hard to really bottom out. So I am interested to see what he's like in year 2 or year 3.
Well, Shamar Stewart went a little higher too. I look at a player like a Keon White and compare them. Just the same rough size, 6'4", 6'5", 275, 280. The guy looks like a giant muscle just walking around. Okay, he's ripped, huge, ridiculous physical specimen. And hadn't quite developed. Maybe needs the right coaching. Maybe so we'll see how things go for Kildrick Falk as he comes out of this draft class. But we got to get past some of this. And look, Dylan Thieneman is a kind of a low moving cost pick here. Really good safety. They've got Kobe Bryant that's going to be a free agent this offseason.
Mm-hmm.
And look, Seattle has the 6th most cap space in the league, but they've got guys like Kenneth Walker that they've got to retain, Rashid Shaheed that they want to retain. If you can replace somebody like a Kobe Bryant with somebody like a Dylan Thieneman, relatively cheaply late in the first round in the draft, that's a home run swing. Okay. Dylan Thieneman is one of my favorite players in this draft. He's almost never there for Seattle. It's probably why they jumped on him, because I take him for the Patriots most of the time. But he's a great player. I think he's going to have instant impact in this league. And that's a solid pick for Seattle to make at the end of the first round there.
Yeah. And just quickly, I don't know, maybe you could talk more about Terrell, because I watched him last year in thinking that he might have come out, and so I'm not really that hip to like what's happened this season with him. But just Chase Bisondas, I think, is a very nice pick as an interior lineman. I think picking Texas A&M, BYU, or Notre Dame or Wisconsin lineman is a really good plan because they're usually going to come pretty well coached and at least a good starting point, understanding how to study and play the position. And I think he's a mobile guard type that works for me. You need some of those cats on your offensive line. You can't have all just sort of like massive pass protector type dudes. And I think Bisson is more versatile than that. Chris Bell is somebody that I feel like I would have picked ahead of several of the wide receivers that went in this draft. And I know he was injured, and suppose there's an injury risk value added to his number, which is why he didn't get picked until now. But I would describe him as a alpha dog. He'll be the wide receiver 1 on your team the moment that he steps on the field. So I think that's a value, and that's a great pick for Tennessee.
Yeah, I mean, Chris Bell, just to touch on him real quick. Look, number one, it's going to be a little while before you get him on the field because of the ACL issues, right?
It was
Which
late.
is
Yeah.
unfortunate because he was such a crazy athletic prospect. But I just felt like so much of his game relied on that athleticism. And I would be a little nervous about taking a guy coming back from an ACL when so much of his game relies on that sort of thing. Now, I say that as a Patriots fan. We just had Diggs come back in real fast time um, from the ACL tear, and he was very successful. But I just think his game's slightly different than Bell, a little bit more of a route technician and that sort of thing. Bell is completely the opposite of that. Most of his production was schemed up in college. A lot of it, you don't want to say like gadget player or whatever, because there was a lot of real wide receiver stuff in there too. But it's just not. He's not kind of the typical wide receiver coming from a college offense to a pro offense that he's going to be able to translate immediately into like wide receiver one type material.
Yeah.
It's going to be time for Bell. And look,
Yeah.
the trajectory that the Titans are on, they've got that time.
Right.
So, that could be a very solid pick for them. Going back to Avion Terrell, though, look, the Jets need help anywhere they can get in the secondary. Okay. It's real hard to go through a full season and not get an interception. You could practically get one by accident. Avion Terrell is going to help the talent level in that room. They took what was his name? Amos.
Trey Amos.
Trey Amos, yeah, to play the outside last year. And he was a good talent. Look, he didn't come on necessarily this year quite yet, but he was a good talent. Brendan Stevens cannot be the best corner in your room. Okay.
Yeah.
So at very least, Avion Terrell is going to raise kind of the baseline of play in that room. The question of whether or not he's going to be stuck in the slot all the time just due to his size, that's not really going to be answered until he actually gets in the NFL. So you get him on the field, you improve the level of play in that secondary overall, and you're doing your team some favors already.
Absolutely.
We got to catch up on a bunch of picks.
Yeah, we'll get there. Elijah Surratt going to his college quarterback, the rematch. Nice choice.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Like a common pick too.
And I feel like those two, especially the style of both of them, what their game is like, that sort of mental connection makes a big difference.
Yeah, and I mean the lead receivers in Vegas right now are Dante Thornton, a 4th round pick from last year, and Jack Besh, who I always kind of thought was a little bit overrated due to the kind of heartthrob story at the Senior Bowl and everybody kind of wanting to get in on that. When he got to the NFL last year, he didn't make much of an impact. You've really got to address that position if you want your young quarterback to have success in this league.
I love Thornton, but I think that the matchup, the pairing, as you said, building your wide receiver room with different talents, Surratt's a nice pairing with that. The CJ Allen to the Giants, again, a team that needs a lot of stuff. So I feel like he's a versatile linebacker. In my categories of linebackers, I'd call him more of an overall guy, all around guy. So those are valuable, and they're players that you can build around. You don't have to. Like a lot of guys, you have to sort of hide. You have to take them off the field in certain situations, or you have to protect them in what coverages you give them or whatever. And I think Allen has a chance to be better than that. We'll see. But that always helps. It always helps to have a second level on your defense that's versatile.
Yeah, and going right on down to the Jennings Dunker pick, just in the interest of trying to catch up with some of these.
Speaking of hyped up from the Super Bowl and the story.
Yeah. But listen, let me tell you about Jennings Dunker, okay? Because we talked about Max Ihinachor, who I believe Houston drafted in the 1st round, right, of this mock draft. Jennings Dunker is going to be kind of the antithesis of this. This guy is a football player, okay? He's not your athletic specimen. He's your country boy, tough, nasty. I'm going to finish you into the ground, and then I'm going to go drink 36 ounces of black coffee on the sidelines guy. Okay. This guy has the handlebar mustache, the mullet. He's got the look, he's got the attitude, and he's got the size. All right. He is a mean mauling guard that's going to set the tone for that offensive line. Okay. If you had any concerns about Ursary or Max Ihinachor's level of intensity, Jennings Dunker is going to not accept less than the level of intensity that was instilled in him in that Iowa offensive line system. Okay. This guy's everything you want in an offensive lineman. And that's the way that you protect your quarterback. That's the way that you make it, change where you are in this league. Right now, your defense is carrying your offense. Your quarterback shook by pressure. He's got a million options to throw to out there, but he can't stand upright long enough to do it. You give him legitimate protection in front of him, like they have done in this mock draft, and you change the ceiling of that team. All right. Houston would be an early season favorite, I think, for a run through the playoffs. Perhaps as far as the AFC Championship and beyond. I think a lot of people thought that, the NFL fans were robbed of a Houston-Seattle type Super Bowl between elite defenses and good offenses because they couldn't keep CJ Stroud upright. You're getting your priorities in order here. Just to go to the next pick in interest of time, again, Michael Trigg headed to Kansas City. That's an excellent pick. He's not the type of guy who's going to do a lot of like blocking and stuff like that. Okay. But he will catch the ball for you. He's got these massive catches, mitts his hands like 10.5 inches or whatever. Patrick Mahomes is going to have an easy time finding them. They're going to look like parachutes to him down the field. Okay. He's going to put that ball right in Trigg's hands. He's going to make a lot of highlight type plays. He's not really going to, be a perfect replacement for a Travis Kelce if Kelce does in fact retire or retires after next season or whatever, but he will give you a weapon in the passing game. And that's something that Kansas City needs.
Omar Cooper Jr., I think a great pick for the Browns. They need, everything, but receivers especially. And I would say Cooper, depending on how you feel about Chris Bell's injury, I feel like Cooper is, right around wide receiver 5 or 6 in this draft. In reality, I think that he's a very underrated prospect right now, which is funny considering he played for a national championship and made the catch of the year and has the most yards after catch for intermediate and deep passes by twice over the next closest person in the class. Why do we not talk about Omar Cooper more? Excuse me. And there's somebody before D'Angelo Pons, but Pons is, am I correct, the second cornerback taken?
In this round, yes.
No, I mean overall. Are we taking somebody else? Oh,
yeah,
so
there was
McCoy's gone.
Delane was gone at 12.
Right, that was one, and then
this is cornerback 3.
Wow. Only the third corner taken at this point is wild.
Yeah.
And then the other person we missed was Emmanuel McNair-Warren, the safety from Toledo. I think has a possibility of being a big time playmaker. So in a way, depends on your priorities. If you're looking to add solid starters, you have one approach to what kind of prospects to take. If you're looking for playmakers, you maybe take more of a chance on guys. And I feel like Warren would be a guy that if I'm looking for playmakers, he's in the top 3 of my list for this draft.
Yeah, and what I find interesting about the D'Angelo Pons pick is, in a league and in a draft where some people have 10 or 11 wide receivers in the top 50, this league is already littered with talent at the wide receiver position. And the Miami mock GM patently refuses to get anybody to play defense on the boundary. So I'm just not entirely, look, you can get all the talent you want in the middle of the field. Okay, Micah Fitzpatrick, Caleb Downs, D'Angelo Pons, that's great. But, the fact is D'Angelo Pons is like 5'7". Okay. He cannot play the boundary in the NFL. I don't care how much he, played against Denzel Boston or played against Carnell Tate in college or whatever. This is a different animal. Okay. He's going to play nickelback in the NFL. You've got your safeties. You've got your nickelback. Great. Go out and get some corners. Okay. Because you're going to need them.
That's funny. 5085 or 5082, depending on which source you want to go to. So he's not 5'7". But
listen, once you get below 5'10", they start selling your real life game size jersey at Build-A-Bear, and it just doesn't matter. Okay.
It's a lot of picks to catch up with. So
5'7" or 5'8". Oh, Malachi Lawrence is he's one of my favorite players in this draft too. This is a guy who he's not going to give you a whole lot in the run game, but he has got a prototypical build for an NFL edge rusher, and he's going to be able to just pin his ears back, go after the quarterback, and make life hell for the opposing offense.
I apologize, Jim. I've lost my. Here it is. Okay, I've lost my StreamYard window for a second. I went to go look at that height for D'Angelo Pons. Let's go back to the first person we missed, and I will pick it up.
So
Cassius Howell headed to Baltimore.
Cassius Howell. See, I think Cassius Howell, to me, I would take ahead of the young man from LSU. I just think that although you've got more, he's got some holes in his game as well. I just feel like maybe there's he resembles more of an NFL ready player as an edge.
I kind of want Cassius Howell in New England just for the sake of all the memes I would make of two Tyrannosaurus Rexes fighting each other in practice.
Yeah.
Caden Proctor going here. Look, this is a little later than I've seen Caden Proctor a lot. He's a big guy. There's a little bit of question as to where he's going to fit in the NFL. Is he going to play guard? Does he have the movement skills to play tackle? He's a guy that, to be honest, I'm a little worried that once he gets in the NFL, he's going to eat his way out of the league. This is a guy who his college teammates nicknamed him Krispy Kreme, which is not a good sign when you're already 360 something pounds. I'm very, very interested to see what weight Proctor shows up at the combine at. I think that if he shows up and shows like he's controlled his weight, a little bit slimmer, 330, something in that neighborhood. It's wild that you can slim down and get to 330, 340, but he can. And I think if he shows up in a little bit better shape, that's going to improve his draft stock dramatically.
Yeah, interesting. Started thinking ahead about the Steelers pick. Anthony Hill Jr., I think, nice linebacker pick. There's a guy that's a versatile player. And, people are really sort of down on linebacker play right now being important. But I think it's become increasingly important as long as you're not strictly worried about the big hits that they make coming downhill in the run game. Yes, that's a nice piece to have as a role player on your team, but so much of the action in the NFL right now is how do you stop the middle of the field? Setting aside the Miami Dolphins having nobody on the outside anymore, I do feel like it's very important to build your defense up the middle right now. So I like that.
Okay. Yeah, and I'm just going to talk about Jeremy Bernard. I have not caught up on Josiah Trotter yet. I intended to, I just haven't. Jeremy Bernard, very reliable option. This is the guy when we're talking again about how you want to build your receiver room, right? You've got Drake London with those big on-firing contested catches, deep catches, that sort of thing. You need Jeremy Bernard, the more reliable, every down possession type receiver to offset that. I think he's an ideal fit there in that Atlanta Falcons room.
Yeah, Will, do you want to do the Steelers pick and then we'll go back and catch up?
Sure.
Said something about cornerbacks, and then all of a sudden they all started flying off the board.
Yeah, well, and I also, I gave Jim, like all the players I probably would have picked at this point for the Steelers earlier when he was asking me about wide receivers. Let me can you talk about a couple other players to catch us up a little bit?
Yeah, sure.
More?
Let me just run through a couple of these guys. Look, again, we went on a little mini quarterback run here in the middle of the second round. Chris Johnson is a guy people are excited about. He kind of falls victim to that West Coast time slot, right? Where a lot of people on the East Coast just don't get a chance to see a kid from San Diego State play. And when we did see him at the Senior Bowl, a lot of times his name was on the receiving end of some highlight catches or whatever. Look, he's a talented cornerback. If that Senior Bowl, the fact that, you didn't really hear his name being shouted out positively hurt his draft stock, this is a value pick somebody's going to get here at 49. He's going to be a day one starter in the NFL and be able to step right into that Vikings team and make a difference. You look like you might be ready for the Pittsburgh pick, so I'm going to shut up now.
Yeah, absolutely. You want that first before we go back and talk about these other guys?
No, go for it.
Yeah, well, do the Pittsburgh pick so everybody else can...
I'll give you a quick one just because it's at the top of my screen here. Chris Johnson with San Diego State. I think it's a really good player. I've had him on my radar for a little while. Had a kind of a disappointing was the Senior Bowl or the other one?
Yeah, Senior Bowl. That's what I was just saying. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's like, okay, well, our impressions are not before we get to the combine. and pro days, our impressions are stuck with what we got at Senior Bowl. So I'm a little disappointed with that. But I think you look at that player on tape, he's he could do a lot of stuff. We'll see. Is he tough enough? Is he athletic enough? What was the issue with the Senior Bowl that really gave him trouble? These are things that you probably got to dig into a little bit more. My pick for the Steelers is Malachi Fields, wide receiver from Notre Dame. First of all, when you consider the wide receivers that have come off the board already, that right away, it's just sort of like, okay, we really need a wide receiver here. We've had a lot of luck with second-round wide receiver picks in the past as a franchise. And I feel like that's sort of a sweet spot for wide receivers generally. But this would have been a scary preceding 50 picks for the Steelers in a real-life draft because, they just got decimated at a position that they really needed help at. So let's hope they wouldn't have panicked in the first round because I think Fields is a guy that will suit them very well. If you look at especially what he did before he was at Notre Dame, when he was at Virginia, I think he ran a bigger route tree, showed more of the things that people sometimes criticize him for in terms of ball skills and ability to get open or whatever. So I think he probably is a better prospect than we're giving him credit for in the deep wide receiver class.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more on Malachi Fields. Jim knows I've been high on Malachi Fields for a long time now. He's one of my favorite prospects in this class as well. Look, underspoken about quality for wide receivers, and it's not underspoken about in Pittsburgh because they have one of the better ones. They had one of the better ones we've ever seen in Hines Ward. Is a run blocking wide receiver, and Malachi Fields is going to bring a lot of that. Okay, he's 6'4", 220 pounds. Every ounce of that is muscle, and that guy brings that to the game, both blocking for running backs, but also blocking for his fellow receivers. Okay, and again, that's another underspoken about impact thing that you can do on the field. That's not only going to it's going to earn you opportunity. Okay, and Malachi Fields does all the small things that are going to earn him reps, which then again earn him opportunity to make catches himself.
So Randy, since you're a fan, I saw there was somebody had ratings up of all the wide receivers prospects with various categories. They ranked them in their category, and they had Malachi Fields very low in body control. And I was like, have you not seen this guy's career? Because I wondered if you feel like, am I crazy, or is it somebody whose body control I think is really like elite part of his game?
Yeah, no, and I think that's another guy that I would say, like, for a big guy, he's a little bit more shimmy and shake than you would think to his game. If you go back and watch the Virginia tape from last year, 2024, it was really impressive. A lot of his production was screen passes and stuff like that you don't typically see a guy of his size making production out of. I thought he had a tough time slotting into the Notre Dame offense. I don't know what that was in relation to. Was it due to him? Was it due to the quarterback, the offensive system, whatever it might be? But his numbers are a little bit underwhelming this season as a result of that. I think somebody's going to get a steal in Malachi Fields if they pick him in this range. Or I've seen a lot of drafts where he goes even later than this.
My money's on quarterback play. I think that was the difference. Calandra was not a great quarterback, but he got him the ball. In Virginia and Notre Dame, like.
So if you want to go back up, do you have anything on Josiah Trotter?
I don't know him that well. I'll be honest. I've seen him play in games. I haven't really studied him a lot. He was a transfer in, right? If I recall correctly. Did he come from Alabama? Was it Josiah Trotter? Am I confusing it with somebody else?
Honestly, I'm not sure.
I will say maybe Jim. Jim, can you tell us something about him?
Redshirt sophomore from Missouri. I believe there's an injury. So it's interesting.
Oh, he's young. Okay.
That we're giving him top 50, right? Nearly everybody that I talk to is top 50. I want to say it was an ACL. But at the same time, nearly everybody, James Foster, among others, say he was the best player in Missouri's defense. And he already had a teammate that got drafted ahead of him.
Yeah, we needed Corey Korbowski for my show because he's the guy that watched all the Missouri games the last couple of years. He's legacy NFL. His older brother was a 5th round pick by the Eagles, which is obviously a big deal. And he was a transfer in, but I can't forgotten from where. Oh, West Virginia. So, yeah, I wish I knew him better. Although the Missouri defenders, I felt like every time I watched them, I like their cornerback, so I watched their defense for him a lot, and I feel like it's a defense that's sort of played together and with a lot of energy and stuff. So probably you're getting somebody there that's, from the right kind of defensive mindset environment. and maybe can, bring that to your team.
Yeah.
Okay, so have
We've
we
had a number of
done
players go off here.
Cisse, Orange, Slaughter, Akis, Hood, Height?
I'll jump in. I love Cisse. I think in a way, when I first started watching this year, I would say 2 weeks into the season, he was my cornerback one for the class. And I get why people like the other guys, but it wouldn't shock me if Cisse has as good a career as any of the corners that have been picked. I love Pons. Pons as a slot for sure, I think will be a big impact player, and that the league is moving that way to where dynamic slots who can do a lot of different things, can blitz, can play the run, can cover anybody. I think those are really valuable weapons. But Cisse as an outside corner, I think is very battle tested for a guy who is not ancient, and is, to me, when I see the way that he plays, his sensibility about balls, ball awareness, we'll call it, for a cornerback, I think is very underrated. He seems to be very good at that.
Yeah, I mean, Cisse generated a lot of excitement in the mock draft community and the draft community earlier in the process. And, a lot of people had him mocked in the first round.
Yep.
And then Casey Concepcion individually knocked him right out of that consideration. So he has that one black mark on his record. He's going to need a little bit of coaching. He has a tough time dealing with those quicker receivers, I guess, and like Concepcion. Mm-hmm. So he's not a instant translate to the NFL, but going to Philly there, that's a good cornerback room, that's a good cornerback system, and I wouldn't be surprised to see him do well. Right after that, you saw Big Citrus come off the board there to the LA Chargers, and beyond having one of my favorite nicknames in the draft, he's an effective defensive tackle. I am curious because they did just re-sign Teilhard Tart to a 3-year, like $30-40 million extension, something like that. They put money into him though, for sure. And I'm not sure that, I'm not sure if they would want to invest this high, this valuable of an asset on the defensive line after they've already put that money into Tart. If they did, I mean, this is a good guy to have play alongside him. So back to you, Will.
Gabe Yakins, I feel like as a guy from Illinois, that edge player, the knock on him, whether it's hard to say this, the knock on him is that he disappears for long stretches. That's the code sort of for, like, is your effort really the same on every down? And to be fair, some teams ask their players to not give, to like basically do their job, but not necessarily like go overboard if rather than coming off the field more. But I just feel like maybe it's a matchup thing. When he's faced the right matchup, has better success with it, and when he doesn't have as good a matchup, he can disappear. So that's where we're at with him. I once again, let me see the workout numbers, and let me then go back to the tape and see how those tools match up with what you see on tape. Let's see who else here.
Yeah, let's Colton Hood there went to San Fran. He's a guy I have some questions about. He went to 3 different colleges in 3 different years. And then he showed up at the Senior Bowl. I thought he was underwhelming at the Senior Bowl. And then he packed it up early as if he thought he had proven his point. So if his point was that, he's a mid-tier prospect in this class that certainly doesn't deserve first-round consideration, consider it proven, my friend. But look, I think he could have done a lot more for himself early in this process, and I'm interested to see how stuff goes at the combine, what the word out of team meetings and interviews with him is, because he's going to have some questions to answer. Why are you school hopping? One school this year, one school that year, one school the next year. It's there's a lot of questions. Why can't you find a place to fit in? Is it your fault? Are you the problem? Teams are going to want to know that. So I think he's got questions to answer. Taylor Green in the 2nd round.
Yeah, well, we'll get to Taylor Green's my guy, so I'll get there in a second. But Romello Height, Texas Tech is he's like people will look at him and be like, well, he's the other guy, so he wasn't facing the kind of matchups that Bailey had. But they move those guys around a lot at Texas Tech, and he often was on the field without Bailey and still produced. So I think actually he's a pretty good prospect. Don't mind that too much. And speaking of guys, you mentioned somebody who underwhelmed at the Senior Bowl. Well, R. Mason Thomas, I thought was pretty good in the All-Star season. I like that pick. I do think maybe he is a more ascendant player. We might not have seen necessarily the best of him, but Jim, you made that pick, I guess. What would be your take on him?
I did. So Buffalo is switching to an odd front, and we're missing the bendy edges. So anything we can do to add some explosiveness to the edge room, it's we're somewhere between R. Mason Thomas and Jayshon Barham. They're not the same player, but we're looking for a player like one or both in rounds 2 or 3, just to give us the edges that we need to play a positionless front 7.
Yeah, okay. And Taylor Green, I actually don't have a problem with anybody that picks him anywhere in this class if you have a proven organization for developing quarterback talent and you are willing to be patient. Because I think it's the kind of home run swing that if it works out for you, no one's going to complain that you picked him high. If it doesn't work out, well, you shot your shot, because if you're going to do it with a guy like that who is a talent. I mean, he's a Randall Cunningham type who the upside is ridiculous. And I feel like LA would be a place where, it might work. His accuracy in the quick game, I don't think matches necessarily what they're after, but it depends. Do you feel like that's correctable with a long levered guy like Taylor Green? I don't know, but he could add a totally different.
Is that me or did he cut off?
Because, Stafford's not a guy who's going to run very much. He's not a guy that's even going to move around that much and get out of the pocket. So maybe it adds some element to their game, and it's worth developing. And if there's anybody that can do it, I would put it in that offensive system.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, it's an interesting pick to me because he's such a polar opposite of Stafford. And the McVay system is something where I would think processing is something that you really heavily prioritize, and that's kind of Taylor Green's not specialty. Right. He's got the physical skills and stuff, but it just doesn't seem like the sort of quarterback that I would expect McVay to fall in love with like that. I think Garrett Nussmeier would be a much better pick for the LA Rams. I think he would fit right into McVay. I think he would be able to sit there and have, 10-hour long conversations about, the minutia of all kinds of things about football with McVay, and Taylor Green would probably be lost in those conversations. He would just be like, look, I can run really fast and I'm tall. Okay.
He can throw the Jesus out of the ball too. So
he can. He takes about a week and a half to wind up on that thing though. So I think that he's going to have to work on that. Okay.
Yeah. No, like I said, lots of work. And Nussmeier, I do think could work there. I think if Nussmeier is going to be successful, he needs two things. He needs an offense that's a sort of a ball distribution offense, like something like what the Rams do or Miami, or Miami did anyway with McDaniel. And the second thing he needs, I think, is a really strong coaching environment, team organization, team environment, because definitely some, reported red flags in terms of his personality quirks, let's call them. So, but yeah, Taylor Green's the opposite of that. He's a total character guy. So yeah, is it around early for even the sort of like take your shot? Probably. Let's see. Rutledge is Rutledge is really ascending. People are buzzing him for possibly being in the first round. And I think, you look at that Georgia Tech team and the way that they play, their offensive line is at minimum scrappy and, gives a lot of effort, and they ask them to do a lot of different stuff in the run game there. So I think that's probably a pretty safe pick. But we skipped over Jacob Rodriguez, definitely polarizing figure.
That was my pick. Yeah.
If you're drafting football players, he's nearly at the top of your list. If you're all about like how athletic a guy is and all that stuff, I don't know, but I love him.
Yeah,
I think he's a great pick. It fits very well in the mold of New England.
Yeah, I mean the J-Rod pick was my pick, and just speaking to that, look, Mike Vrabel and his staff have made it very clear that the top of their list is character, how you fit into the team, putting the team first, those sorts of things. Jacob Rodriguez brings all kinds of character, football intelligence, leadership, those sorts of things. The things that he comes up short at are, literally being short. That's not necessarily so much of a problem here, I don't think, for Mike Vrabel. I think he wants a football guy. And I think that there's a very good chance that when all is said and done in this draft, Jacob Rodriguez, we look back and see him as one of the top 10 players in this class. He falls because of physical limitations, and that's just a benefit for us. We bring in a really good football player, upgrade our linebacker room, which, I mean, we saw them get gashed in the Super Bowl. 114 yards of the 135 that Kenneth Walker ran for were run for outside the tackles. In this particular system, they are going to ask the linebackers to do a lot of that work. And Jacob Rodriguez is going to show up every day with his lunch pail, with his hard hat, ready to put in that work.
Yep. I completely agree. A little bit. I need to scroll down when we have a second, Jim, because I'm lost about who else we're talking about here. So, Cronover, I saw picking at offensive lineman from Texas A&M. You heard what I said earlier. I think is always a pretty safe bet for floor, and I thought he was outstanding at the Senior Bowl. I know people will say he was better at the Senior Bowl than he is in real life, but I'm willing to give him, sort of the benefit of the doubt. That's the last thing I've seen. So yes, recency bias, but seems like the tools are there. And I think when you're drafting for what you think a guy can be, and it's up to your coaches to get him to that point. So,
well, and in some cases you're drafting for what a guy is. And I think we saw Arizona Cardinals take Akeem Messidor at the top of the third round here exactly for that. Okay. There's not a lot of potential in a 25-year-old, 60-year guy like Akeem Messidor. But what you've actually got right now is very good. And, he's a mature player, a mature prospect. I think he is going to line up next to last year's pick, first round pick, Walter Nolan, and kind of be able to help offset some of the weaknesses of Walter Nolan's, inconsistencies and those sorts of things. I think he's a great player to put on that defensive line and kind of step into, I would see him stepping into the leadership role that might be vacated by what's the name of their vet that's leaving, the old guy on there anyway. But I think that's a good spot for him. Blake Miller going to the Cleveland Browns. Again, we talked earlier about the Cleveland Browns, most of their offensive line being gone, if not all of it. Blake Miller is going to be a starting right tackle day one in this league. He's not going to blow anybody out of the water. He's not probably going to be like an all-pro tackle or any of that, but he is going to start today. And that's what they need. They need guys that can contribute on day one. And Blake Miller is going to do that for you.
Nice. Yeah, I think that's both of those are great picks for them. Kyle Lewis to Houston, I love. Yes, coverage specialist. So, in my 4 categories of linebacker, that's the second most valuable for me. Compared to, all around would be most valuable, but coverage is very difficult to find guys that can cover like that. And he's not incapable in the, stopping the run and screen game or whatever, but coverage wise, he can do things for you that most linebackers can't. So,
and Kyle Lewis is one of those guys that's really going to kind of have that tweener label. And we're going to find out, is he a tweener in that he can do many things, or is he a tweener in that he doesn't have a position and he just can't be used, an Isaiah Simmons type player. We got a guy like that up here, like Marte Mapu.
Yeah, I was just about to say Marte might be the best case scenario, that a guy that can do different things. But this is what you hope.
Yeah, and it's just, there's a lot of questions about that. Sometimes the NFL can be a real specialist league, and it's like we want somebody who's really, 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 really good at one thing, not somebody who's pretty good at a lot of things. So that's kind of the question I would have there. Antonio Williams heading to Washington is an interesting pick. Washington needs wide receiver help when Terry McLaurin was out, and they were another team that it seemed weird their offseason activities last year, like having the success they did and then immediately screwing with that chemistry by playing around with Terry McLaurin and his contract extension, keeping him out of training camp. It's they need the wide receiver help. Antonio Williams is not my favorite wide receiver prospect in this draft. The most encouraging argument I've heard about him is that the Clemson offense struggled when he was not on the field. Personally, I just don't know how to translate that into the NFL. I don't know how to go, the college team wasn't good when he wasn't there, so that's an NFL quality. Look, you got to get a wide receiver. You waited a little while. I don't think you got the best one of the bunch, but you got something, and that's more than you had before when Terry McLaurin wasn't there. So, Jim, Will, we got you on the clock here with Pittsburgh.
Yeah,
What are you thinking?
I'm just about ready. Let's see. Can you go back up to just the? I think I know what to pick. I'm gonna take. Which guy do I? I'm gonna take Garrett Nussmeier here. Maybe not exactly what I would do. I think it's fairly realistic, though. I do think they have a Nussmeier connection with his dad working for Mike McCarthy, so it wouldn't surprise me. And I think he's probably, of the remaining guys, the safest fit for that sort of what you want to call a Texas Coast offense, as you said, with where accuracy and those sort of short to intermediate passes, quick game for that offense, I think is really important. And I would say of the remaining quarterbacks on the board, he's the most likely. Many things not to like about his game. As I said, there's some locker room issues. Supposedly, hands are small, which we've dealt with before with Kenny Pickett, and everybody knows what sort of the issues with that can be. But I do think that Nussmeier, if you get the pre-injury version, Senior Bowl version, more comfortable with that pick. And at this point, I'm taking a quarterback somewhere in the mid rounds, every year until I either get high enough in the draft to get somebody I really love, or until I happen to hit the lottery on one.
While we're on the subject of Senior Bowl standouts, I know Jake Slaughter was picked a few picks back, I think by Jacksonville. And look, Jake Slaughter and Garrett Nussmeier coming out of Mobile, they were the two guys that kind of seemed like they established themselves as like pro-ready prospects today. They might not have the highest ceiling or whatever, but they are going to come in and they are going to be ready to be professional NFL players right away. Garrett Nussmeier is probably going to spend most of his career holding a clipboard. Maybe at some point in time he'll become a serviceable, bottom half of the league type of starter. That would be his ceiling, I would think. But Jake Slaughter is going to be a starter day one in the NFL. When he was down in Mobile, you saw him having kind of those like higher level conversations in terms of talking to quarterbacks about how his snap was, how he needs to deliver it specifically for them, stuff like that. That's just like the smaller technical details of a position that separates a guy from a guy who's just really good to a guy who's a professional football player. And that's really what Jake Slaughter is. He's going to immediately slot into that Jacksonville offensive line and make them better from day one. Then we can go right to Dalen Everett there. Miami finally decided to get somebody to guard somebody on the boundary.
Maybe they've been listening to the show.
Yeah, listen, Miami's got a lot of J2 picks too. They're a fun team to draft for in these mock draft scenarios. Dalen Everett's a guy that, a high-rated prospect coming into college. He played all of his college ball in the SEC, and he stepped up at big moments in big games. I think that this guy is kind of an underrated prospect in the process. And I think that he's a good grab for Miami. I think he probably is their quarterback one, 5 minutes after he's selected. So.
Nice.
So a couple questions I have. So Marlon Klein, curious, and then Jadarian Price, Jonah Coleman, Bo Stevens.
Klein, I think, is a guy that's, it's funny. Like, I didn't really hear much about him all year from anybody. And I feel like in the last 2 weeks, I've heard his name like about five times.
Wait for the next 2 weeks.
Yeah, there you go. Exactly. So he feels like he's going to be a combine riser as well, but he's big. Like a lot of the tight ends in college are glorified wide receivers. So I do think there's just a big advantage to being in the class and being a guy that obviously just on the hoof, as they say, looks more like a guy that you could count on to block somebody, especially at the end, in line. So I like that. I like that aspect of his game. You can see him getting more buzz as you said, tests well. People start digging into him and they see that he's more than just a pass catcher. I think that will benefit him.
Yeah.
I'll take one. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. I was just going to say Darrell Jackson Jr. just popped off the clock there to the Atlanta Falcons. And look, they're going to need defensive help. They're going to need an edge rusher at some point in this draft too, I think. remember exactly what they took in the first 2 rounds, but Daryl Jackson Jr. is an incredibly interesting prospect, physically gifted. There's not a lot of people on the planet that are built like this man is. Okay, 6'5", 330, 35-inch arms, big old 10.5, 11-inch mitts, something like that. Right? When he gets his hands on you, you know it. He's going to need a lot of coaching. Okay, he's not as effective on the line as you would hope a player of his size is, but he did show that competitive fire, and he talked about it at the Senior Bowl. Why did you come here from the Shrine Bowl? And he said, look, I heard a lot of talk out there, and I wanted to show that I'm a guy who competes, that I'm a guy who this is important to. And I think at the end of the day, if you have that inside you, that's what really counts. So with those physical tools and that drive to be better, to show people that he's better, I like that pick for Atlanta. I think he's going to be an impact player on the defensive line.
Yeah, and I love Daryl Jackson. I have him as number 4 in the class, so I feel like that's a pretty solid pick. And I'm really, really irritated because somebody has derailed the show by picking Bud Clark, who I was about to pick in 2 I love Bud Clark. I think he's this safety class is crazy. It's as good as the quarterback class is bad. And Bud Clark, I feel like a guy that people forgotten a little bit because the safety class is so deep. But I don't know, in that when they were having playoff runs and a real contending team, he was already making plays. So I kind of feel like it's just continued now. But this last year, or the last 2 years, I felt like he has really produced a lot of big plays and is versatile, which I think I love in a safety. I like guys that aren't stuck in the box nor stuck on the back end. And don't really come up and make any plays. So he's all over the field. Love that. And
if you pair, well, I was going to say, if you pair him with the Chris Johnson pick that they made in the second round, Minnesota's really made an impact on their secondary, really put some playmakers in there. That would be impressive. But Bud Clark is a playmaker on the ball. That's what he does. And he's a loyal guy too. He turned down offers from bigger schools to stay at TCU for his entire career. I think he's a high football character, high intelligence type of player that any team should want to have on their defense. And I'm going to stop talking now because it's your turn to pick.
Well, and also my backup to Bud Clark would have been Jalen Kilgore to play nickel for the Steelers. I don't love him necessarily as a safety, but I think he's going to be an outstanding nickel player. So I just feel like it's hilarious that we're not. It's just like once again.
And just so you know, Will, I was not the one that sniped you. Like Will and I got this thing where sometimes I know who he's looking for and I'll snipe you. That was
I believe
not
you, Jim.
me.
Thankfully, the Steelers have a lot of picks this year. They do have a little ammo. They can make little moves to move up a little bit. So maybe if I had lost, in real life, Bud Clark, I could have moved up into the next spot to get the guy that I wanted. You're going to have to put all up on the board because this is going to be a BPA pick, and you're going to have to maybe scroll down a little bit slowly so I can see what else is there.
Oh,
I can't take
you're
Scott.
Assuming the people that have used the simulator before you pick good players. You're already making an assumption that the players listed there would be the best.
No, I'm just looking to see who's there. I think actually the safest pick I can take at this point is Tiernan, the offensive lineman from Northwestern. The Steelers have one opening on their starting offensive line. So obviously they either have to re-sign a free agent or they have to, who's an older guy, or they have to bring in someone new to fill that spot, or they have to fill him from the back up and supplant the depth. But I'm a believer that, as you said before, you just keep drafting offensive linemen and you play the best 5. So I'm not even committed that the guys they necessarily have are the best 5 if you add a few more pieces in. So why not?
Yeah. And specifically Broderick Thomas, do you think the Steelers would pick up his 5th year? So
Broderick Jones, right?
Broderick Jones.
I think they are extremely unlikely to pick up Broderick Jones's 5th year, but they have a 27-year-old 4th stringer that stepped in towards the end of the last month of the season and was fantastic in Dylan Cook. So I think that they go into the season with Dylan Cook at left tackle. If they don't re-sign the guard, Broderick Jones will get the first shot at either his choice or their choice for him to play left, to be their starting left guard starting the season, or to fight for that left tackle job and show that he's better than Dylan Cook. So I feel like, probably one of those two things is going to happen, but they're still going to add people to the mix. They don't have enough depth to have choices and have selections. So I feel like they're still going to continue to add. And when in doubt, add an offensive lineman. Danny Dennis Sutton from Penn State, I think, is a fabulous pick at this point in the draft. I think you're getting a very high floor, high motor player, which is nice to bring into your organization. And for Miami, they looked so lackluster late in the season on defense. I know that people like their defense and they like their defensive coordinator, but I felt that they just looked like they were in give-up mode, which is never a good sign for a defense. Even when your team is bad, usually the defense comes out and plays hard. I didn't see that, but I feel like they could use a football guy like that on their defense.
Yeah, and to go to the pick right before that, Derek Moore, talk about guys who blew up the Senior Bowl week. We saw Derek Moore absolutely level Markel Bell, and really the highlight of the week. He kind of earned himself a little bit of a, like a Mike Green type moment, just without the baggage. He probably got himself in squarely into day two. I think that's a good pick. Look, he's a powerful edge rusher, about 6'2", 6'3", 260, 265, something in that neighborhood. He's going to refine his technique a little bit. He wouldn't be going in the third round if he didn't, but he's going to be an excellent player here.
Yeah, Derek Moore, I think, is a better prospect than at this point in the draft. To be honest with you, I lost track a little bit. Didn't know that he was still around. I might have considered that, but as Jim said, can't go by the simulator. His top picks, you got to know your guys, which is great. Someday, by the way, Jim, I want to have a simulator that's got difficult mode where there is no list of the available players, or they're not ranked. You have a list of players that aren't ranked, and you have to choose one from there.
So that's what happens when I load the board. So when I load the board, it's a board, but then as people do mocks, everything moves. And I'm still up. I'm on algorithm 5.0. I've got my idea for 6.0, but that won't be done until June. So
yeah, I just like the idea of the challenge, like it is in real life, where you have to really trust your own board and not necessarily think about what somebody else is going to pick first. We don't know, So you think, we as amateur draft people on Twitter, we all think, oh, that person is not going to go to the fifth round. Like, why would you pick him now? But in real life, every team has its own board and every team has different priorities, and very hard to predict that kind of thing.
Okay,
although they do tend to get stuck in like the high school rankings, it's like they probably build their boards when guys are coming out of high school and mildly adjust them as time goes on. But, it's very hard to move down a guy who was a 5-star down to undraftable, and it's very difficult to take a 0-star and make him the number one pick in the draft like happened last year.
I see Zakee Wheatley coming off the board here to Buffalo with Jordan Poyer potentially on his way out the door in free agency. And either way, I think he's like 34, 35, right? It's time to start thinking about the next guy. And, Buffalo, I don't think they've necessarily done the greatest job thinking about the next guy on that defense. You consider the amount of talent that's potentially going to walk out that door this offseason. Hold on one second, guys. I've got to mute this. I have a very loud, large German Shepherd that's very excited in a second. So give me one moment, guys. Sorry.
They love getting your attention when you're not giving it to them. Jim, scroll up for just a second so I can see the people here. Logan Jones, I feel like, is a very solid pick for a team like San Francisco. They like their offensive linemen to be mobile and kind of precise in their footwork, and I feel like that's the strength of Logan Jones's game, from what I can tell. Oscar Delp, unsung kind of tight end, didn't get a ton of targets or a ton of visibility, but I think that's a good bet that he will be a better pro in a way as a tight end for what the NFL asks you to do compared to what tight ends do in college.
Yeah. A pick that's getting my eye right here is Logan Jones, headed off the board to San Francisco. And not that he's a bad pick and this is the right range for him, but it surprises me that Connor Lew would still be on the board. I understand he tore his ACL, but he was far and away the best center prospect in this class before that happened. And it just surprises me that he would still be sitting on the board right here. Cage Casey headed to the Rams. Big guy. He played left tackle primarily at Boise State. He's going to play inside in the NFL. And so it's tough to kind of translate what you saw in Mobile at the Senior Bowl week to professional level, because he primarily played tackle at the Senior Bowl also. I'd really like to see him with the guard position. Look, he's like 6'5", 330, 340, something huge. And a buddy of mine that was down at the Senior Bowl that week, who was also 6'5", 3 something, said that Cage Casey was the biggest 6'5" he's ever seen. He said he was just built like a mountain walking around down there. And he was like, he just said his measurables doesn't do him justice. That's a big guy. You're going to be able to plug into that line. And where was it? He went to LA. That's right. Yeah. And be a serviceable backup there. Look, I think they're already pretty strong on the interior. Getting a guy like that, and who knows, maybe he can plug into the right tackle. They drafted who was it they drafted in the first round? Lomu, maybe. Anyway.
Yes. So they've done Lomu, they got a corner, they got a quarterback, and they got Cage Casey.
Okay. All right. Well, the Patriots are up here. We went with Chris Brazzell in the first round. And then in the second round, what did we take? We took Jacob Rodriguez at linebacker. I think that one of our pressing needs here is either a right tackle or an interior offensive line. Okay. And if you could pull up those spots for me. Oh yeah, you know what? Let's go ahead right there. I'm gonna grab myself my guy that I really liked out of the Shrine Bowl. Okay, Emil Wagner. This guy, he looked a lot better at the Shrine Bowl than he did at Notre Dame throughout this year. He's still really young too, and he's got a frame that you've got to add some weight onto. But that's fine. You know, we're going to sit him behind Morgan Moses. We're going to have Morgan Moses going to teach him the craft of playing right tackle. Okay. And this is a vet that you want doing that. Okay. Emil Wagner is going to sit there for a year, maybe 2. And Morgan Moses might finish out this contract. Okay. There's talk about him retiring, but listen, it's hard to walk away from $10 million a year when you got 3-4 kids to feed at home. So he's going to hang out. He's going to teach Emil Wagner how to be a right tackle. They're going to put on some weight, really develop him into an NFL body. He's a younger player too, I believe. So, you know, he's got time, and this is a long-term future pick for us. The other option I would have been looking at was Jeremiah Wright out of Auburn, who I like as a left guard prospect. I think that we bring in a vet like Kevin Zeitler, someone like that, or the guy out of Cleveland, their left guard, whose name is escaping me right this moment. Bring in someone like that, play them a year, you know, maybe 2, depending on how much you could get out of them, so they can really kind of be the experience between Will Campbell and Jared Wilson, who's going to have to move over to center. You need an experienced guy over that. You see those guys fumbling around loops and stunts. Everything confuses them. They need some experience on that side of the line to help them out there.
Yeah, Brendan Thompson, I think, is a pretty good choice for Seattle. Just, you know, it's an undersized, deep threat, fast guy, but they've made that work with Shaheed. But I guess there's a question of if they can keep Shaheed. So if you're looking for a Shaheed replacement, it's a little bit of that. I don't know if he has the same sort of wiggle as a return guy, but I really like what he does as a speedy receiver. It reminds me a little bit of like Roman Wilson in that there was a fast guy. They schemed ways to get him open. If they got the right matchup, there's nobody in college that can cover a guy like that. So I can see that sort of working. Did we actually,
I was checking. I may have to make an admin pick for the Vikings. So
okay, gotcha.
So what do you think of Emmett Johnson to the Broncos?
Well, hang on. Well, sure.
I think Emmett Johnson's a good pick for the Broncos. Look, we saw that J.K. Dobbins struggled with injuries this year, and when he did, and R.J. Harvey was forced to carry that load, it just wasn't quite as effective as when you see R.J. Harvey in a more limited carry role. I think that they're going to have to get a running back that can carry the bulk of the carries, offset R.J. Harvey, and help carry the weight of that offense. Especially with whatever's going on with Bo Nix. You're coming in the year potentially with Jarrett Stidham as your quarterback. You're going to be running the ball a lot early on in the year while you wait for Bo Nix to come back from if you're waiting for Bo Nix to come back from that ankle injury, or really just waiting for him to get 100% and right.
So, Will, you are the runner-up to Mr. Irrelevant here at pick 99.
Nice. Did Jake Golday go? We didn't talk about him, so I think that he did, but I have no way of knowing.
Yeah, Jake Golday went at the end of the second round, I believe.
Yeah.
I think he went to Denver. I think he went to Denver at the end of the second round.
Yeah, good pick. I would have been surprised if he made it this far. I just wanted to check because I didn't see his name and we didn't talk about him.
Yeah.
By the way, another guy that sort of worked his way up from 0-star recruit to now being in the conversation, and I every year it's the same thing. Those guys end up getting so underdrafted compared to what their tape looks like, because I'm telling you, seen it for many years, been following this observation and talking about it for at least 10 years, that it just teams, especially Blesto, the Blesto teams are really about the quality of the thoroughbred that they're picking. They, if you were a highly ranked high school player and you went to a big school and you did well there, and you weren't terrible, those guys are going to get drafted ahead of guys who were 0 or 1 stars and overachieved. And I feel like that's a shame because there's a lot of really great players in the NFL who fit in that category, and hopefully he will be the next one. I think he's also suffers from the fact that because he's tall and lanky, he doesn't look as athletic as he actually is on tape and instincts wise. For a linebacker, when you have good instincts, it makes you look a lot more athletic. You can be super athletic like the Steelers' current middle linebacker, Patrick Queen, and have zero instincts, and it's like he looks like a player that's slow, even though he isn't.
And Jake Golday is another guy. He's not quite getting the same sort of talk as like an Arvell Reese or someone like that. But I do think he's another guy that could potentially bring some benefit at the edge. He was initially recruited as an edge at Central Arkansas. I spent 3 years there. And he converted over to linebacker during his college career, but he does have that background. And at 6'5", 240-ish, he's certainly got the frame as well. So it'd be interesting to see if in the NFL he can bring any value in the edge rushing game.
Yeah, for the Steelers, since we got to the Steelers pick, I don't know. What would be more beneficial, Jim, to pick who I think the Steelers would pick here? I'm pretty sure who they would pick, or to pick who I might pick, because I think we have different opinions.
Well, I would say show off your board. Your board is always one of the most unique ones I come across during the draft cycle. I would definitely shout out maybe, at this point, you probably have a few top 100 players that haven't been taken.
I mean, I would say this: who I think the Steelers would pick, I don't think is necessarily a bad pick, and it is definitely a player that is we have not talked about a lot. So let's talk about him. I'll make it Nick Singleton, the running back from Penn State. For the fit for the Steelers and what they're now going to do on offense, I think you really want to have a guy like Kenny Gainwell, but who maybe gives you a little bit more than that. I love Jaylen Warren as a guy to work in tandem with whoever you're bringing in, but he isn't the guy that's going to run pass routes for you. I think Singleton is, and you're getting a bit of a bargain because of his injury. So I'll make it Nick Singleton to pick 9.
Yeah, I mean, I've got questions about Singleton even prior to when he showed up to the Senior Bowl. And look, before he hurt his ankle, he looked disinterested. He looked listless, the same way he looked all year last year. I don't want, personally for me, I don't want a guy who disappears when we're bad. I want a guy who steps up. Right. His teammate, Katron Allen, stepped up. And for me, Katron Allen is ranked ahead of Nick Singleton. They do different things.
Yeah, me personally, I think Katron Allen might be the most underrated running back in the class. And if I were picking running back to be my starting running back and not thinking about what's going to happen on third downs to fit my roster, I would 100% take him over Nick Singleton. I think you're taking a little bit of a swing on the athleticism and the upside for Singleton, and what he did 2 years ago was tremendous. Here's the thing, same is true with Drew Aller. What they did during their playoff run was pretty dang good, and what they've done since then has been pretty terrible. So, I also feel like I was of the opinion that James Franklin was an absolutely terrible college football coach to play for. There's just a lot of things about what his approach to the game was and how he treated the press and players, and so maybe it just could be unhappy in that situation, in which case, should have taken an NIL deal and gone somewhere else. For all we know, maybe he had a deal and he couldn't leave. Now we got college players that can't leave because they have their NIL deal. So I'm glad we had a subject. I'm glad I made a pick.
Singleton probably would have gone higher in last year's running back class
Absolutely.
than he will in this running back class, and this is a weaker class.
Yeah. I think he's likely to go day 3, and it just depends on if you got inside, if he got inside information about what he can do, or what the situation was at Penn State that none of us here have. But anyway, I'm glad
I mean, it's not, you can't argue the fact that everybody at Penn State checked out pretty much for the season, and that's got to be a management problem at some level, right? Because if all your workers quit or if all your students fail, that's the teacher's fault. That's the manager's fault. It's not all the students. It's not all the workers. So there is some element of that. But again, like I said, when he did show up at Senior Bowl week, to people there, he looked disinterested. He was not an impact player even before he hurt his ankle.
Nope.
And when you take it easy all that time, when you kind of all that time and then you try to ramp it up again, sometimes that's how you injure yourself. So
I'm telling you,
I have some questions.
Jim, I think the goal of this show is to try to have conversations about guys we don't usually talk about. So I'm very pleased that I picked him compared to the other person I was going to pick, because that would have been sort of like, oh yeah, he's really good.
Who were you thinking about?
Stooks from
Stooks.
Arizona State. Yeah, like I feel like that's also a very good fit. But I personally think I've thought for years that slot and a versatile player in the secondary like that is the pieces that they're always missing. There's never enough of that in Pittsburgh. And if anybody goes down in the secondary, they're sunk every year. So I kind of feel like the more pieces you have like that are great. But they don't seem to value that, since they let Mike. They never even. They had Mike Hilton, who was a very great player in the slot, and they refused to ever pay him more than his minimum contract in the early years. They never signed him to like a longer term contract. They let him go, and they never replaced him. So they obviously, at least in that regime, didn't really care that much for that position. But I feel like modern NFL, very important position, and it's a hole for the Steelers right now.
Yeah, and before we continue with the conversation, I first want to thank Randy and Will. Will, you were filling in. I think you had 2 hours notice, and you were doing it sick. So much respect for me. I also want to give a shout out to everybody in the chat, but I do want to give a very special call out. Chris is here every week. He was actually one of the podcasters last week. And if anybody wants more podcast time, one of the things I love about Chris is he gives the draft professors more podcast time on his Last Call podcast. So if you are somebody and you like podcasting, you want to follow Last Call at Chris. That's Chris Connor. So Chris, you're here every week. You draft for different teams. I absolutely love having you here. There were several new people that were here. So, Chris, I don't know if you've been here before, but thank you. Michael, you were new. Thank you. Jordan for the Panthers podcasted with us yesterday. He's going to be podcasting again on Monday. Randy is going to be podcasting again tomorrow. We're going to be doing some round 1 grades. And I think Jake even popped in, and Jake is a draft professor, and he'll be on the podcast with Randy tomorrow. So,
hey Jim, can I quickly? First of all, thank you to you for thinking of me to fill in, and obviously Randy, what a great job you were.
Hey, thank you for stepping into the last minute to carry me through this. Okay, your back's got to be killing you.
But I was just going to say, in the chat, someone mentioned that Ty Simpson was not selected, and I just want to talk about that for a second. I'm curious where you guys are with Ty Simpson. To me, 2 of the worst qualities that you can have as a quarterback prospect coming to the NFL are A, having difficulty throwing a catchable ball consistently, because I think that can cover up a lot of deficiencies. It makes your receivers look better than they are because they're not having to struggle. You have to be a really sophisticated catcher of the football to catch wobbly passes and make it look easy.
How's it going, other Randy?
Hey, other Randy. Hey, Randy, what's going on, buddy? He's actually Dave Damashek, if you just listen to him. Randall Cipher. Or Slaver. But also the other thing that's worse is crumbling under pressure. And I felt like that was the thing that just killed Ty Simpson's draft stock towards the end of the year. I think someone will draft him early, maybe even the first round, and maybe even my beloved Steelers, and I'll be pained. But that is serious red flags for me as far as being a quarterback prospect.
Yeah, I mean, Ty Simpson was really caught between a rock and a hard place in terms of deciding what he was going to do in January. Because, with the limited experience he has, that's a huge red flag, right? We do not see a lot of quarterbacks come into the league with less than 19 starts in college and succeed. It's just not a thing. That's where the line gets drawn right there. On the other hand, conversely, if he went back to school and came out next year, he'd be like damn near 25. And, a lot of people don't want to draft a 25-year-old prospect. So again, he found himself caught between a rock and a hard place here. And, at the end of the day, he made the best decision that he could. It's going to be good for his development to be able to go sit behind somebody and learn and focus on football every day and get reps in, even if they're in practice, even if they're in training camp, even if they're in preseason games. It probably would have been good for his overall skill level to go back to school, but I understand it's a tough spot. It's a business decision at the end of the day, and he tried to do what he could for it. I see him a lot at the end of these 3-round mocks, and I sit here and I wonder, what are these GM's plans for quarterback? Okay, because there's a lot of teams here that did not take one. Arizona doesn't have a plan for quarterback.
Yeah.
Okay, I mean, Kyler Murray probably isn't going to play there again. Yeah. There are a couple teams here that do not have a plan for quarterback. What are you going to do? Look, you at least got to take a swing on a guy like this.
And one of the points I think that we should talk more about, we won't really belabor the point here, but Will, I know that you and I have had this conversation numerous times. When it comes to drafting a quarterback, you bet on upside. Don't focus on the floor. So like Taylor Green, there's a lot wrong with him, but the ceiling is going to be among the highest of the players in the draft class. So if he hits the ceiling, you have to swing for the ceiling. Don't draft for the floor at quarterback.
Yeah, I mean, if you have a defensive-minded head coach who's not really interested in developing offensive players or putting them in great situations, he's just trying to get the third down, then a guy like that doesn't really help you very much. But if you're taking a swing, take a swing on a Josh Allen, take a swing on Lamar Jackson, take a swing on guys that are thought to have the upside athletically, because at least there are things they can do to buy. Like Taylor Green can buy some time in his career early on before he can really process and understand everything he sees in front of him, before the game slows down, just by the fact that he's got the legs to make himself relevant in the game and buy time. So I think that's a hidden secret for guys. Like if you have mobility in the pocket, especially, you can wait. Maybe you're not getting rid of the ball as quickly and on time as you're supposed to, but it buys you some time to learn for your learning curve. So
it's another one. It's another one of those things you want to take a lot of swings at too. Okay, it's if you don't have a quarterback, draft one. Okay, it can't hurt you. What's going to happen? You're still not going to have a quarterback.
Yeah.
Okay. But know that's not your guy now. And now next year, you try again. Okay, you take a lot of swings at this until you hit the home run. That's how it works.
I think you just can't be married to any quarterback that you pick, that way. It would offend them to take somebody else,
And one of my favorite exercises every year is Will does a draft a team for about 25 people. So we get to learn 25 quarterback names in that.
Well, I think the most we've ever had is 22, but still, it's plenty. You're getting far down to it, and it encourages you to find some quarterbacks that you think have a puncher's chance. Like the sleepers at the bottom of the class. I'll give you one for free. Maverick McAvoy. There would be a guy that's what is he going to be, the 20th quarterback in the class or something? But I felt there's a guy from Western Kentucky who probably, once again, in one of those ball distribution quarterback positions where he's not asked to be a hero, but is more asked to be a point guard. It might work. He's, doesn't have so much mobility, but he played in an offense that's more professionally suited that way, both at Abilene Christian and Western Kentucky. So, you see that guy play and it's oh yeah, he makes some mistakes. He's got flaws to his game, but yeah, you have to learn, you have to watch a lot of quarterbacks to contextualize what the class really is top to bottom. Because otherwise we end up talking about the same 4 or 5 guys over and over again. We have, none of these shows have we gotten into Sawyer Robertson or got, Klubnik or guys that will get drafted, but
Luke Altmaier.
Yeah. How relevant hard to say.
Well,
really got to see.
We covered all those players on the channel. If anybody wants information on those quarterbacks, there is a quarterback playlist on the Draft Professor YouTube, and you can listen to 4 of us debating the quarterbacks. We did it over the summer, and then we repeated it in December. So with different podcasters. So you will be able to hear, for example, if you want to hear what we said about Mendoza over the summer, wow, it's the same thing that we're saying about him now. So there's a reason that we podcast on the draft every day. And I mean, those summer podcasts, there were a lot of people that viewed them. That was very obvious that people were interested. Same thing happened when we did it in December. So if you want to know more about next year's quarterback class, we already have the plan to podcast on it in May. So next year's quarterback class, we're literally going to hit the ground sprinting starting in May.
Next year's quarterback class, Jim, you're going to need a longer show.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be the quarterback series over the summer is going to be 11 weeks. We're going to cover 44 quarterbacks. So we are diving deep, and we are not.
Wait a second. Are you suggesting that there are more quarterbacks than Arch Manning in this class?
There will be, yes. Yes. But ironically, Arch will be on episode 1. So right. I mean, you got to go for what people watch. But why don't we
weren't begging for Andrew Buddy? Yeah.
Yeah. Will, do you want to let everybody know about your socials and all the other draft events that you have upcoming?
Yeah. Accidental Zen on Twitter is me. Also, you can come to SteelerFury.com if you're a Steelers fan. There's a lot of, it's like an old school message board action. There's also from front page articles and a lot of draft coverage, not only of the Steelers, but I do a special small school thing I call the B2B, which is my handle on that site, B2B Directional State, that you'll see a lot of times with undervalued bigger school players and small school players. I've been putting out for about 15 years now. That's always a sort of a labor of love towards the end of the season. So if you're interested in these small school players or guys that flying below the radar, that's something for you to check out. And the week before the draft, Steeler Fury podcast is my show, YouTube, and all the places podcasts are available. We'll have at least an entire week of very long, detailed, lots of information, draft content during that week, including our participant mock volume 2.
Randy.
Look, I do snap judgments on YouTube. I do a daily show, usually about 9 a.m., usually about an hour. A lot of Patriots stuff because I'm a Patriots guy. I'm always looking to bring guests on, especially people who like to talk about draft prospects, like to talk about the offseason, the process of building a team, those sorts of things. So anybody listening right now, if you are, got a camera, got a mic, and you're interested in talking about football, I'm interested in talking to you. So look me up on Twitter, RI Sports News. I don't post a lot of my stuff on there just because I don't know. I never got into the Twitter thing. But I do post a lot of stuff on Facebook. I post a lot of stuff on YouTube, and, you should go check it out and see what I've got to say. And, grab your mic, grab your camera, and come correct me if you think I got it wrong.
Yeah. Randy, big ups to you for getting out of bed this week after the Super Bowl. Cause I've had some Super Bowl weeks when you don't, it's just like you don't want.
Listen, we have not only had our share of Super Bowl wins, but we have had our share of Super Bowl losses, and we've had some ones that sucked. We've had some ones that really were hard to watch and really were hard to deal with after the week. This is not one of those. Okay. This is not one. I felt like we were playing with house money from like about the second week of the playoffs in. This was kind of a lucky strike in terms of being able to make it through the AFC playoffs without encountering the Mahomes, the Allens, the Lamar Jacksons of the world, Joe Burrows, all these other guys that just weren't there. So, we're playing with house money. This was a team that made it way further than they should have. And you know what? I'll tell you what, they were still hanging around in that game, even into the fourth quarter. If Drake May had been able to lead Kyle Williams and hit him on that throw, that would have been 19-14 game, 5 minutes into the fourth quarter. And that's a little bit of a game. So I'm happy with where we're at. I'm happy with where we're headed. And, I think we've got a lot of success in the years to come. So that's
Speaking of where we're headed, we have a lot of podcasts coming at you. So tomorrow there are 3 podcasts. Sunday, there's going to be a few more. I think Sunday, this week, I think we're up to 6 or 7. 2 podcasts, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. We're going to be doing the same mock draft next week. I will take a peek to remind myself which podcasters are going to be on the camera. But want to give a shout out to everybody in the chat because we just did 100 picks in 120 minutes. So shout out to all of you. Thank you very much. We are going to close this down for Will, Randy, myself, and the 80 podcasters at the Draft Professor. Thank you so much, and we will see you on a podcast again bright and early tomorrow morning. Thank you, everybody.